All right, so there is a lot to go over right now because the committee is going to have a tough time trying to determine who's going to get in tomorrow. Um, so according to this playoff predictor, because I put this in earlier, it still has Florida State in. Um, it has them in over Alabama, but of course, it doesn't take into consideration. It only takes into consideration stats. It doesn't take into consideration like injuries or anything because it doesn't know what the teams look like. It just puts in stats. So obviously, the committee, the outcome is going to be different from what they're picking. In contrast to what this predictor says. Um, I don't know what's going to happen because I started thinking about this during the game with Florida State winning. Obviously, I don't know if they're going to get in or not, but Tate Rodemaker is probably going to be healthy and back by the time the playoffs come
Well,
in
he
December. We have about a month. He should be back by then. So
he's
that's
gonna be
something the
back.
committee's going to have to dig into consideration.
Yes and no. Okay, so here's what I want us to do for a second. Okay,
Yeah.
here's what I want us to do, and this is something that I think you got to look at it. Okay, when the committee weighs in the strength of schedules, because you're going to weigh in strength of schedules, you're going to weigh in conference championships, you're going to weigh in injuries to key players,
Yeah,
and
that's something this doesn't take
and
into
this
consideration.
basically just gives you the analytics of everything,
Yeah.
tells you who's in. Now, what I want us to look at is we already know Michigan, Washington, they're a lock. Like they're already in without a question.
Yep.
Now, between Florida State, Texas, and Alabama, this is where things get interesting. So go and look up Florida State's schedule, okay?
Yep.
Because they were talking about this tonight during the game and everything, and they were talking about their key wins are against.
Clemson, which is okay. I mean, the Death Valley is a tough place to play, but
No, I mean,
it's
here's why I
not.
say Clemson's
It
not.
doesn't stand out that much.
I mean, you look here at their schedule and everything.
LSU's the big one, I think.
Duke, they
That was the
struggled
first
against
one.
Duke for the longest time, and Duke had a backup quarterback the whole game.
No, Riley Leonard played the first half.
Okay, first half. Then the second half, they still
I
had a
don't
back.
want to talk about that game. Let's move on.
But what I'm saying there
That was
is
a bad memory for me, man.
they struggled until the final like 10 minutes of the game.
The second half, they blew the doors open.
And then you struggle against Miami. I mean, come on. And then I'm looking here, you struggle against a Florida team that's absolute cheeks, like absolute cheeks this year. And then you put up one of your worst off, and not to mention you were down 13-0 against Northern Alabama.
Yeah,
Like I, I'm not
but
trying
there's no doubt.
I'm not trying to play the biasy card here because I do believe that it should be the four best teams. I don't think it should be the teams with the undefeated records. I think it should be legitimately the four best teams in the country.
I
And
would
that,
say Texas and Alabama look like the four best teams in the
yeah,
country.
and I feel like it
It,
would be, I feel like because if you put a Florida State up against a Michael Penix Jr., which you'll see that in the Rose Bowl if everything works out, because it would be 2 versus 3, 1 versus 4. Florida State's not going to beat them in that game. I don't see it happening.
I hate it for them because their defense they
Look,
look great like they have almost all
but
year.
okay,
And there's a couple of pieces on
yes and
offense that
no, yes
still
and
look really
no.
good, and I just hate it for them if they don't get in. It's a weird thing because on one hand, it's like,
That's the thing is
yeah,
everybody's sitting here raving about Florida State's defense, but you're playing a Louisville team that just got beat by Kentucky. I mean,
Louisville had some highlights in this
let's
game.
be honest for a second. Louisville is awful. I mean, really, the only thing they had going for them at the beginning of the schedule is they had a very weak ACC schedule this year. And so it's one of those things to where I'm looking at it from that standpoint of course, Florida State's going to look good. I mean, one, you got to take the weather into consideration. It's raining the whole time in Charlotte today.
Yeah.
So when you play in a wet weather environment, it's harder to throw, harder to catch, harder to run. Like, I mean, you counter in a bunch of factors. Now, the reason I want to look at this for a second, okay? So they're saying the three key wins are Clemson, Duke, and then Louisville. Okay. Let's go look at Clemson's schedule real quick.
Well, don't forget about LSU. I know that was the first game of the year, but
Okay. LSU too. So let's start with LSU. Let's look at their schedule because we're going to do this based off of how the committee would look at this. So go to LSU schedule. So you're going to have
how about that win over Georgia State?
yeah, so we're looking here at it. And you lose against Ole Miss. You lose against Alabama. And is that really all of Texas or LSU's losses this year? Is three?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. Um,
The Auburn one looks good.
and then you have close games against Florida and Texas A&M there for a while until fourth
Yeah.
quarter. So looking at it from an LSU standpoint, here's why I don't think it helps Florida State at all. It's because LSU's behind you. And if I'm the committee and I see a team that you beat that's behind you and they necessarily didn't win out the rest of the year in convincing fashion, that's going to hurt you. So now go to Clemson. Let's look at that one for a second.
Had a better close to the season.
They did have a better close to the season, but some of the games they lost should have been inexcusable. I mean, Clemson lost to Duke, okay? Which beginning of the year, Clemson, Duke, that was a good game. And then you lose to Florida State at home. And
No,
then
well, yeah, but
you struggle against Wake Forest. You lose
yeah.
to Miami, which is awful. And then you lose to NC State, which is awful.
That one was stupid because Duke came off the win over NC State, being 24-3, and then NC State turned around and
And
beat
and then
Clemson. I don't
granted,
think they
Clemson,
lost another game the whole year.
yeah, I mean, granted, Clemson did beat Carolina later in the year, but South Carolina they
And Notre
stunk.
Dame,
Yeah,
that
and
they shut Notre Dame down. Like in the second half, like Estime had, I don't think he did much of anything in the second half. They really locked down on him.
but Clemson's, I mean, Florida State's record here, from what I'm looking at, is okay. You take the losses to Miami and NC State. Now go back to Florida State. Did Florida State play NC State this year?
No,
No, they did not. But they did play Miami. They beat Miami 27-20, which Miami beat Clemson. So you got to take that into consideration of okay, here's a situation where you beat a team that beat the team you beat, so therefore it doesn't really justify that win very much. So that's going to weigh lower on the metric scale. So, in my opinion, it doesn't help Florida State. And I think one of the big factors in this one is, and I hate it for Florida State, but I think the injury to Jordan Travis is going to be what kills them in this committee's discussion. Because,
but I
and
think Rodemaker was doing a decent job in the two games he started. When he took over for Jordan Travis, I mean, he did what he needed to do, and he got the job done. I think he looked a lot better than Brock Glenn did tonight. But like I said, they'll have him back come December.
I don't think that's going to be enough though, because I
It
just,
is something they'll have to take into consideration, though, is that he will be.
now let's go to Texas for a minute.
Now, if you're going to try to justify Alabama getting in over them, if it came down to that, no, because I feel like it'd have to be both Texas and Alabama. It's one of those things with with Florida State. It's like you hate it might be the wrong decision to put them in, but it's also be the wrong decision to leave them out. I don't know, man. It's tough.
So
I
Texas
will
won
say, you talk
record.
about how Texas lost to Oklahoma, and the two teams Oklahoma lost to, Texas throttled. So
Yeah, and that's what hurts them a little bit. And not to mention, not only that, but you had a struggle game against TCU. You had a you had
it's a weird thing with
you should have
TCU.
lost to Kansas State. Like I'm being honest,
Yeah,
Texas lost to Kansas State.
they should
Uh,
have lost to TCU. For TCU usually has their number though. They always struggle with TCU for some
you
reason.
should have lost TCU. You struggled against Iowa State. You pulled away with that one late. Um,
But they did look more complete with Quinn with his return.
yeah, but I mean, I'm sitting here looking at it though, and I'm like, that's the thing about Texas though, is to me,
But you cannot justify leaving them out. If it came down to putting Alabama, Florida State in, you can't justify leaving them out over Alabama.
to me, Texas hasn't been the complete team all year. Um, they looked good early, lost to Oklahoma, then they struggled there for a bit. Quinn Ewers was out. Then they had a few wins at the end of the year that looked really good, but they haven't been that consistent program. Whereas if we go to Alabama, besides the Iron Bowl, and the only reason I'm saying that is because we saw it with Georgia Tech, we saw it with
Hopefully.
Florida State, and it rivalry week is just one of those games that it's you basically throw records out the window in that week. Um,
Yeah,
so
you did struggle with Arkansas at home. That was
Ar-
a tough one.
Arkansas was a little tough. I mean, we did just come off of the game against A&M, and then we also had Tennessee right after that. So I mean, that was kind of a one of those games that was like a trap game almost. Um, South Florida was in the middle of torrential downpour, and we were kind of justifying like trying to figure out our quarterback situation. You did shut Lane Kiffin down to only 10 points that game.
Yeah, the Ole Miss can't get over that Alabama hump.
And then Tennessee, I mean, you shut them out in the second half. And then LSU, I mean, you flat out throttled them in the second half, shut them out, except for that one score at the beginning of the half. Kentucky, you shut them out second half. And then Auburn, last second touchdown. Whoa. Something I just noticed. Alabama's last two wins have been 27-24. Wow. Now, if that's irony, I don't know what is. Because all the Auburn fans were like rooting for Georgia in this situation. And so I'm wondering if Alabama was like, all right, we're just going to mimic the score of the Iron Bowl. But honestly, I feel like the four teams that is going to give you the best, and not to mention the reason I say this is because I'm not trying to be an Alabama biased here, but I'm looking at statistics from what's happened in previous years. And every year, even with a one loss SEC champion, they've been in the last 9 seasons. And so it's one of those things to where, yeah, Texas beat Alabama. So I think in this situation, I think Georgia, or Michigan, Washington are in, and then I think Texas, Alabama. I think that's what the committee goes with.
That's probably what it's going to be. But I just hate.
I hate it for Florida State.
Yeah.
It's one of those deals to where, like they mentioned here at the end of the game, they played too conservative at the end. If you really wanted to impress the committee, you would have scored a later touchdown to kind of like give you more style points.
Yeah, I don't know how much that would have helped because
I don't either, but I think it would have helped more than just running the clock out.
I said,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, people are sitting there talking about, oh, Florida State's defense tonight, Florida State's defense tonight. I'm like, Louisville doesn't really have that great of a receiving core. And I mean, they really rely on their run game. And once you take their run game away, Jack Plummer is kind of like not very good because, I mean, if you saw it, And I mean, I even watched a little bit of the Kentucky game, and even in that game, he was very like scrambly, very squirrely with his feet placement and everything. I mean, he's very unorthodox in his throwing mechanics as a quarterback. So it's one of those things. Where I think genuinely it's going to be Alabama, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and that's just because simply I think that's going to give you the best product for the college football playoffs. And if I had so if I had to pick the order of things, it would
Well,
be
it'd probably
Michigan.
be Michigan, Alabama 1-4, Washington, Texas 2-3.
I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
because
And you know what I forgot about? I think it was the Alamo Bowl. Texas played Washington. I think it was the Alamo Bowl last season. So that's a rematch
that
from last
is true.
year.
That is a rematch from last year. And then
Interesting to think about. And I think Washington won that game, right?
okay, so if we throw the scenario out there, that is Alabama, Michigan, and Texas, Washington. Okay, looking at Alabama, Michigan first. Who do you predict to win that game?
Well, you remember the last time those two teams played, right?
Yes.
2019. Alabama missed the playoffs because they lost to Auburn, but they beat Michigan in that bowl game.
I think Alabama gets it done just because of how good their defense played against Georgia.
Well, Michigan has a tough defense too, so that could be a lower scoring game.
They have a tough defense, but if you notice what Milroe did in the final 4 minutes of the Georgia Alabama game, he took the ball and basically put it in his own hands and just ran all over the Georgia defense there in the final few minutes to secure
Yeah,
that.
Michigan might force him to try have to throw more.
Michigan, I don't see them being able to contain a running quarterback like that. They haven't had one all year because Kyle McCord wasn't really a running quarterback. He's a pocket passer. So I feel like Michigan is going to get too over antsy and try to blitz a lot, and it's going to create more running lanes and stuff for Milroe to be able to escape and use his legs more in that game. I say it's going to be close, and if you had to put it on a neutral site, both of them playing each other, I would give Alabama the edge. I would say 6 or less. It's a spread on that one.
Hmm.
Um, Probably with a final score of like 27-21, something along those lines. Um, Now looking over at Texas, Washington, man, that's going to be an offensive fire.
Yeah, that's gonna
Um,
be a higher scoring game.
because, and I think that's the reason the committee. This is why I genuinely believe the committee is going to go with this. Is because if you look at history past from the college football playoffs and the playoff semifinals, you've always had one game that's been a defensive slugfest, and then you've had another game that's been offensive fireworks. And so if you put Alabama, Michigan together, Texas,
Um,
Washington together, you get both of those.
Last year's was those were two high scoring games,
Yeah.
but that was I guess kind of an anomaly because yeah, you're right. It's usually one
Usually it's one
side.
defensive game and then the other one's usually offensive like firepower.
And
So
the games that are usually defensive are usually the Alabama games.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so this one here, I just think it's gonna be Alabama, Michigan, Texas, Washington. If Texas, Washington plays each other, I want
I,
Michael Penix to do
yeah,
well,
that's I'm kind of
but I just feel like Alabama and Texas are on a collision course right now. I just feel like it's going to be a rematch for the title game right before you both of them join forces in the SEC next year, and I think it sets up to kind of show us what the rivalry is going to be moving forward for years to come. Um,
if that is going to be the top four, I think it would either be Alabama, Washington, or Texas, Michigan.
yeah, but I don't see Washington moving on just because I mean Texas's defense is good. I mean, I'll admit it. Like if they're playing at their best, then they're good. Um, But the other part of the Alabama thing for a
I
second
don't
though,
know how bad Xavier Worthy. I don't know how bad he's hurt. Um, but hopefully he'll be back in time.
yeah.
I think he will, but
But one thing I will say is it's just looking at Alabama. If we, and this is where I was kind of talking about the player aspect of it for a second. If we look at injuries, Georgia had some key injuries to Brock Bowers and
yeah,
Lad
they were
McConkey
they were both struggling today.
that they were struggling. So that would have hurt them in the schemes of playoffs, even if they would have lost earlier in the year and then won the SEC championship. Um, then you look at Texas, like you mentioned, Xavier Worthy is going to be questionable moving forward.
Hmm.
Washington, thankfully, they just got McMillan and stuff back. But if he would have been out and everything before the Oregon matchup, that would have hurt them. The only really healthy team out there right now is Alabama, besides the Jace McClellan loss. But the thing about Jace McClellan is he will be back in time for the college football semifinals because I think it was just like a high ankle sprain, and I think they did like the tightrope surgery or whatever on him.
Yeah.
So he'll be back in time. But that's really the only key injury for Alabama besides Kool-Aid McKinstry, which is in concussion protocol, but he'll be back. Um, so yeah, really like from a injury and a healthy standpoint, Michigan and Alabama are your two healthiest teams right now. Everybody else between Washington and Texas, they still have a few guys that are like, yeah, they're getting there, but still kind of iffy.
Yeah.
And then Florida State, like we mentioned already, Jordan Travis. So
I don't know. I hate it for Florida State though, because it's I feel like if you leave them out, you're doing them wrong. But I also feel like that when it's not, I don't know if that's the right choice to leave them in either. I don't know. Uh, there's going to be some debate tomorrow. I don't. It's not going to be that easy. I don't think.
no, it can't be. And I'm not saying that just to say that. I genuinely believe this is going to be the hardest the committee's ever had to like make a decision.
Because it doesn't matter. You're going to have a lot of unhappy people.
Yeah.
Look at it. I don't know. It's it's a tough call. So your final predictions.
Final prediction is going to be Alabama versus Texas national title game. And I think this time around it will be a lot closer. Um, I mean, the first game was close. It was only a 10-point spread.
Yeah.
But I think this time around you do have I mean, Alabama's been on a revenge tour this year ever since losing to Texas. They knocked off LSU, who beat them last year. They knocked off Tennessee, who beat them last year. They knocked off Georgia, who they last lost in the national championship game. So Texas is really the only domino left in their way. So I think it's going to be Texas Alabama in the national title game, and I think you're going to have a final score of 28-23.
Okay, I did want to bring this up because it is the Alamo Bowl that Washington won last year. That that would be crazy if that's the the matchup for number 2 and 3.
I would love to see a rematch of that.
I almost want to pick Washington again, but man, I don't know if that is indeed going to be the matchup.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. That's going to be really tough.
I really want to see Washington win the whole thing. I really do.
Yes and no. Part of me here's why I say no on that. It's because if that happens, then you're going to start hearing that college football is rigged and that the Pac-12 is going to win the championship in their final year just because it's their final year and they wanted them to go out with a trophy. Um,
I think that's your Alabama bias sneaking through again.
no, that part of it, that part of it I've heard from a couple people now.
Who? What?
Well, I was talking to like an Oregon fan the other day, and they were talking about it. They were like, here's why I don't want to be in the playoffs this year. And they brought up the aspect of like it almost feels like they're just gifting them a championship if they make it and then win everything.
I think the Pac-12 has been the best conference this year. They've had a lot of competitive teams.
Best conference, but no defense still. So it's one of those things like
shout shout out to Arizona too, because I predicted them
yeah,
to be bowl eligible when we
yeah.
started at the beginning of the season. I
And
know I
I'll be honest, like I predicted this possibly being the year without a Georgia and Alabama in the playoffs. And I mean
yeah.
it's
No,
looking possible.
Arizona. I thought they would go 6-6. I didn't think they would potentially have 10 wins on the year. They could have
So
potential.
let's just look at something here.
Uh,
If you picked Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama to win, and then Louisville to a win one, what would have been the outcome there?
well, it's what we're thinking was going to happen anyway if you pick Louisville.
Yeah.
It's what we would have anyway. But the predictor obviously I already did it. It has Florida State in at 3. But again, this doesn't take into consideration injuries and what these teams really look like on the field. It just takes into
I'll
stats.
be honest though, I think the thing that's really helping Alabama and Texas in this situation is, and the thing that hurts LSU or Florida State, I mean, is all of Florida State's wins have been to teams that are now either ranked outside of the top 10 or not even in the top 25 at all. And so, whereas Texas's win is to number 8 Alabama, which is right behind you, who just beat number 1 Georgia, and then they lost to Oklahoma, but so it's and Oklahoma still ranked inside like the top 16, I think. So
And look, I mean, one of Oklahoma's 2 losses was Oklahoma State, but that's who Texas got to play for the Big 12
yeah,
championship.
but the thing is about Alabama though is, and like Greg Sankey said, it's one of those things to like, do you keep us out after we just beat the team who dominated college football for 29 straight games?
Yeah, I don't know that you can do that.
I mean, it's one of those things to where if you beat the team that just won back-to-back national championships and won 29 straight, are you really going to get punished for that even though you lost to Texas? Like, and that was what Greg Sankey said. He said if that's the case, then go ahead and put Texas and Alabama in there and let us fight it out.
You know, it'd be hilarious if the committee just pissed everyone off in the country and left them both out and put Ohio State and Georgia in at
Dude,
3 and 4.
I would be pissed as an Alabama
That would
fan.
be hilarious. It's like, oh, let's forget about the whole thing. Let's make it.
Like that's the part that I'm actually worried about is the fact that Alabama beat Georgia, and now you've opened up the door for Florida State to stay in and then Ohio State to slide back in.
I don't see that happening. I really don't think that's. I mean, I guess someone could argue that because Texas and Alabama are all the way back at 7 and 8, but I don't see that happening.
No, I think we're on to something though, is I think it's legitimately gonna be Michigan, Alabama, Washington, Texas. I hate it for Florida State, but at the end of the day, I mean it's one of those deals to where watching them tonight play Louisville, like, yeah, okay, you shut Louisville to 6 points, but like I said, it was raining and Plummer is not that great of a thrower. And they relied mainly on their rushing attack. And once you take that away from Louisville, they have nothing. And so, looking at that from this vantage point, and then looking at how atrocious your offense was, even with a third string quarterback, I'm sitting there looking at it from this. You have a third string quarterback, and you have 5-star recruits like Deontay Coleman and Johnny Wilson and all these guys that you could throw it to, and you can't simply throw a screen pass and get 10, 15 yards. Like you're only getting like 4 or 5 yards of play. Like this is ridiculous.
Having to hand off to Trey Benson
Yeah, but
to
that's
carry.
what I'm saying is in order to get any offense going, you had to take your quarterback completely out of the game and had to go to Wildcat. Do you really think you want to watch a Florida State team play a Washington team in the Wildcat the whole freaking game? No. Like, let's be real. Like, we're not going back to the 1930s and playing the triple option with the wing T. Like, it's dumb. Absolutely retarded.
Well, I'm interested to see how the
That
debate
would
goes tomorrow,
be
though.
almost like sitting there listening to Joe Biden talk about ice cream.
No, I'd much rather watch Florida State in Washington.
But
Kill me if I have to sit through Joe Biden talking about ice cream. Gosh. Yeah, but it is going to be interesting to see what the final outcome is going to be tomorrow.
so it starts at noon, which is 11 my time. I would be just now getting out of church. And then when is the actual selection? Is it at 11 or is it at 4?
Um, how does it usually go? I know the show itself starts at noon, but there's a lot of interviews and stuff that go on. So the actual selection isn't. Is it? It's not at noon right away. It's. I don't know if it's at 4 or
Look
not.
it up real quick. We got a
It,
few minutes left
they really drag it out. Um,
here. Okay, so here I just got a notification here. Um, before we get off the air while you're looking that up.
JJ Watt emergency 16 playoff. Random draw to determine matchups between Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida State.
Let's look here. How much time we got left? 6 minutes.
I want. I think it's just whenever they finally come to a conclusion and say, "Hey, these are who the teams are going to be." Uh,
Okay, so we're just hours from the college football playoff rankings of 2020 season. As well. Playoff picks, team records / votes. So right now, most people are voting. Oh, dude. Right now, here's after the conference championship games, okay? This just came out from ESPN. Michigan 13-0, 15 out of 15 votes. Washington 13-0, 15 out of 15 votes. Texas 12-1, 14 out of 15 votes. Florida State 13-0, 8 out of 15 votes. Alabama 12-1, 8 out of 15 votes. So it comes down between Alabama and Florida State who gets in.
what if they just decided to have Florida State and Alabama play next week after Army Navy? Winner gets in. I'd be okay with that. Man, that's oh man, that's gonna be tough, man. It's gonna be tough. Which, by the way, before we get off, because we only have 4 minutes left, Army Navy, who you got? I'm going Navy.
I'm going Army in this one just because they finally hit their sweet spot late in the year. They knocked off Air Force and everything
Yeah,
too. I got to go with the
it's
Black Knights.
it's so weird. They're both 5 and 6, so the winner gets called eligible. Oddly enough, but I'm gonna take Navy this year.
So I'm looking here at a lot of these people predicting everything, and they're doing like we are. They're torn between Alabama and Florida State, and a lot of them are picking Alabama over Florida State.
Yeah.
Like Alex Scarborough is Washington number 1, Michigan 2, Texas 3, Alabama 4. Um and then Heather Dinich is number 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Texas, Alabama 4. And then Bonaguru is 1, Michigan 2, Washington 3, Florida State 4, Alabama, leaving Texas completely out of it. I just don't think you could. If you put Alabama in, you can't leave Texas out. That
No, you can't. It's either they're both in or both out because
yeah,
you can't have one and not the other.
it's one of those things where I'm really trying to like look at everything that's coming out as of right now. Um, projecting the college here, according to Heather Dinich. Um, seeing what she has to say real quick. Okay, she has Michigan number 1, um, 2 Washington, 3 Texas, and then Alabama 4. And then she said why they can finish here. The Crimson Tide now owns the best win of the season after defeating number 1 Georgia to win the SEC title. It's likely the committee keeps them behind Texas, though, because of the week 2 loss to the Longhorns. Alabama should keep alive the SEC streak of having a team in the college football playoff every season since it started 10 seasons ago. So she feels like because of the SEC's dominance and everything from a championship standpoint, the SEC has a pretty much a lock going in, and Florida State's left out.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But that was one thing that they brought up after the Alabama Georgia game is they were like out SEC's won like 13 out of the last like 17 championships or something like that. And so it's like an absurd number that where they were like the SEC is the pinnacle of the college football playoffs. Like it's the foundation. So if you rip the
It's not
foundation
the
out,
SEC, it's Clemson, right?
no, no.
Oh, jeez.
But no, I think Heather Dinich and a lot of these guys are predicting it being Michigan, Alabama, Texas, Washington, which
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like from a sports fan standpoint, it would be the best football you would see all year between those 4 teams.
Mhm.
I just feel like Florida State getting in would kind of you don't really know, and
Yeah.
and I feel like that's what the committee's afraid of is putting somebody in there that yeah they may do like TCU did or they may be a complete bust like and that's honestly what I'm afraid of is another Georgia versus TCU situation with Florida State getting in.
Yeah. All
So
right. Well, we'll
yeah,
we'll find out tomorrow though. So, all righty, man.
see ya.
See ya.